We don't know how your great-great-grandfather got all of that land, but I can tell you he didn't get it from sleeping in.
The blade swinging frogman of the UDT.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Unbeatable Mind podcast. This is Mark Devine, your host. Thanks so much for joining me today. And I'm not going to waste your time. We're going to have a really interesting conversation with Daron K. Roberts. Before I introduce his background a little bit more, let me remind you that in this interesting time that we're living in, it's a great opportunity to really up our game as leaders, as parents, as human beings. And it just so happens that the book that I released literally a week before we all got locked down is basically positioned to help leaders step up and deal with their emotional issues, their emotional shadow, their biases, and the fear-based conditioned reaction that holds them back from really tapping the full potential of their team. So it's a leadership book, but it's a team building book, and it's a personal development book all wrapped in one. And I've gotten some phenomenal feedback on it. And I think it's a great book for this time. It's like I said, it was kind of custom built for the next generation of leadership development, where we have to go deep and look at our own bullshit and deal with it in order to bring out the best in our team. Otherwise, we're the limiting factor. So let's not be that. And wow, you might have some extra time on your hands. So check it out. staringdownthewolf.com is where you'll see more information about that. That's our little page, and also some free video training, or it's available, of course, at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. So thanks a lot. Appreciate your support there. Okay, so my guest today is Daron K. Roberts. He's a former NFL coach, author of a book called Call and Audible. Let me pivot from Harvard Law to NFL coach. Super stoked to learn more about that. And he's the founding director of the Center for Sports Leadership and Innovation at the University of Texas. He hosts a popular podcast called A Tribe Called Yes. And Daron, you coached at Kansas City, Detroit Lions, Cleveland Browns. Welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about your early life and what got you kind of going in this direction.
No, thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. So,
yeah,
I'm a fifth generation East Texan, born and raised in a small town called Mount Pleasant.
Sure.
And my dad, Baptist minister, and one of the earliest experiences I remember was he took me to a small church called Walnut Grove Baptist Church. It was a little kind of country church out in Carthage, Texas. And we go there, we go to the cemetery behind the church, and there's a headstone there for my great-great-grandfather, Bill Roberts, born 1840, died 1912. And we have a record of him owning 160 acres in 1870.
Cool.
This is the first time that he sort of emerges from historical record is in this deed. And my dad says, we don't know how your great-great-grandfather got all of that land, but I can tell you he didn't get it from sleeping in. And, so that set the tone for me, Mark. That was the beginning. I had plans of being governor of Texas. So, went to UT, was set on going to Harvard Law School, applied, got waitlisted 4 years in a row, finally got in, and thought I was on track before working a football camp.
Yeah. Well, let's just hold up right there. Let me go back a little bit. How many, you had siblings?
So one older sister. There were 9 years that separate the two of us. So just the two of us. And it's interesting because my mom and my dad each have 10 brothers and sisters. So I grew up with 20 uncles and aunts. It was chaotic, man. I mean,
holidays must have been in total chaos.
Oh, just a free for all, fist fights and rolling around on floors. And, I think the childhoods of my parents probably convinced them that they wanted to downsize considerably.
Right.
So there were just two of us growing up.
And so you became like a quintessential achiever. I don't want to say overachiever because that has a negative connotation. Like it, I mean, tell me, your dad, set the tone for you. He obviously was as a parent, really impressed upon you the importance of hard work and, all the all the things that parents want to do, and you really took that on. You didn't rebel at all. What were like the challenging parts of your upbringing? You could just kind of like skip past all that and went straight to Harvard. So let's go back a little bit.
You know,
I doubt it was that simple.
it wasn't. So my dad was a minister, but also he was a soil scientist with the USDA. So he would test the soil in parts of East Texas for acidity, and so I kind of watched that sort of that work ethic growing up. My mom was a third grade teacher for 15 years, and then I remember her going to night school to get her master's, and so she would drive 45 minutes Monday through Thursday, would take me to the University of Texas at Tyler, small school in East Texas. She did that for 2 years, got her master's, and then she became an elementary school principal and did that for 17 years. So, you know, in my family, it was religion and education, and there was very little room for deviation between those two guideposts. So, you know, my dad was nice but strict. It was yes sir, no sir. You had chores, you did them, and you know, I really credit them for one thing. You know, I had a lot of friends who kind of saw sports as, you know, their ticket or the way that they were going to make it big. And I never had any illusions, Mark, growing up that was going to be it for me. Like for me, my parents said, listen, it's going to be all academics for you. We don't care that you only need a 70 to play sports. You're going to have to make straight A's for you to be eligible in this home. And that was just the place that I grew up in. And, you know, I resented it then, but, you know, at the tender age of 41, I can really look back and appreciate having that kind of support.
So you played football in high school and then obviously in college, or how did you get interested in football?
Yeah, you know, so football for me was a way to hang out with the guys who looked like me at school. So I was in this gifted and talented program, and they separated us, you know, once we get in high school, you had this GT track, they called it. And I remember being, you know, one of two black males in the class, but obviously my experience on Sunday at church was anything but that. And so sports for me, I was above average, you know, decent speed. I studied the game, played high school football 4 years there. You know, Friday Night Lights, which has sort of made the Texas high school football mythology what it is. I mean, that was the way it was in my town. There were 12,291 people. The place shut down on Friday nights, and you know, I labored on junior varsity and made it to varsity my junior year, and found a way into the starting lineup my last year. And let me tell you, Mark, that was because of studying and knowing how to diagnose plays. It wasn't due to my 40-yard dash time, I can tell you that. So, but you know, it was had some great coaches, had some coaches who really cared about us, really wanted us to glean more from the game than X's and O's. And it was probably one of the most pivotal experiences of my life. I never had any illusions I would play afterwards, but it definitely set the stage for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And how did you get interested in politics?
Yeah, you know, my parents took me, so it's a 5-hour drive from my hometown of Mount Pleasant to Austin, where I live now. We came here for kind of a vacation, and I remember taking a tour of the state capitol building. And I can remember looking up into the rotunda, seeing all of the portraits of the governors sort of working their way up to the top, and thinking, man, I want to be one of those folks, right? It's interesting, right? Like sometimes like the imagery is so strong that it just grips you. And I wanted to help people, but I also just remember like standing in that place, in that building at that time, and thinking, I want to be a part of this.
I'm curious right now, in retrospect, whether you're happy you did not get into politics.
Well, my wife is happy, that's for sure, Mark. I can tell you that much.
Because talk about a shit show.
Oh man, it's a shit show. Is putting it mildly. I tell you what, you're being kind.
Right.
I am. I tell you what, I think that, and we'll talk about this. You know what? While I was in law school, I worked a football camp to reconnect with a buddy of mine who was an actual coach. So he was a coach in high school, and it was the summer before my last year of law school. And he's like, "Hey man, you got a couple of weeks off in the summer?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Let's go to the University of South Carolina, and I've got to work this Steve Spurrier football camp, but you can just ride with me. We can catch up." So I get there. We're sitting in a room, Mark, and Coach Spurrier walks out, and he's like, "All right, guys, one of our volunteer coaches didn't show up. Can anybody fill in for him?" So,
And your hand shot up, or did you think
well,
about it?
it wasn't quite so quickly. It took me a little while to convince myself. I'm looking around. I'm thinking to myself, I mean, damn, I was a first team all district strong safety. I played high school football. I can do this. So I raised my hand. Meanwhile, my buddy's like, if
What
you
are you
get us,
talking about?
he's like, "Man, you better not get us kicked out of this damn camp." I'm like, "Don't worry about it. We're good. We're good. Don't worry about it." He's like, "Hey," he goes, "What's your name, coach?" I say, "Coach Roberts." He's like, "All right, Coach Roberts."
That's awesome.
He's like, "Well, where do you coach?" I'm like, "Oh, damn it. The plot thickens." I said, "Well,
Right. Here.
Mount Pleasant High School." It's like, "Oh, that's great. Mount Pleasant High School." He's like, "All right, man, you got group 6. Like, "Yes, sir." Had no clue what in the hell he was talking about. And turns out group 6 consisted of 66th graders. Okay.
Nice.
None of whom had any athletic talent whatsoever. I mean, it was one of those deals where, like the parents buy the kids like, "Oh, you're going to have the summer football camp experience." And
Right.
I always tell people, being on the other side of coaching, if you ever, to all of your listeners, if you ever have to pay for a college camp, there is a 95.7% chance that your kid is not getting recruited. Right?
Right.
If you got a receipt, there's a good chance the kid's not on the recruiting list.
Put it into the fantasy column, right?
Yeah. So all of my kids have receipts. So it was a hell of an experience for those 3 days.
I bet. And so you're a junior at Harvard Law School now, or this is between your junior and senior year?
Yeah, so it's between my second and last year. Yeah, my second and third year. Yep.
Oh, second and third year. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't really do junior and senior in law school.
No, it's okay.
So, and then this experience obviously had a profound effect on you. So you go back to school and you're cranking out, becoming a lawyer. And tell us about your transformation, or your what you wrote about, calling it Audible.
Yeah, I try to always periodically sort of take an inventory of how I'm feeling, and I just noticed that the 3 days of that camp, it was the first time that I did not have to set my alarm clock to get up. I was just excited every morning. At night, I'm on YouTube. I'm watching Deion Sanders DB drill film and taking notes. I go to the local Walmart. I get a bucket cap and I get a whistle. I think I'm looking somewhat official. But just being around those guys, you had kids in this camp from the right side of the tracks, the wrong side of the tracks. You had kids, their parents didn't shop at the same grocery stores or go to the same kinds of churches. But it just reminded me of how, once the whistle blows, nobody gives a damn about socioeconomic status and what race you are. You just got 11 guys trying to execute a play. Right. And that experience really, for me, Mark, I think shifted my view of public service. Like I saw coaching as a new form of public service, and decided that I had to get in, man.
Man, I love that. When you're talking about that kind of blindness toward any type of cultural distinction or identification, I experienced that in the SEAL teams. And we had people from all walks of life, rich, poor, white, black, every color you can imagine, super nice guys and some guys who were kind of a pain in the ass. And yet when it came to the mission and the team, like, we were all in all the time and everyone was equal. It was all about just performance. And it's such a rare thing. And
It's right. I mean, I don't, with the exception of the military and sports, I can't really think of many other settings in this world where you instantly, when the light switch flips,
Mhm.
I mean, all you care about is getting it done, right? And there's no room for like discussion, debate. It's like,
Right.
listen,
Yeah.
it's time to go.
Get over your shit. Let's go. In a sense, this COVID-19 crisis, metaphorically or even in a very real sense, is sort of like that. It's a giant wake up call for us to come together and solve these, some pretty intractable issues, problems.
Yeah,
We can't like go back to like the old stories about race and inequality, because we're all equal when it comes to the virus. We're all equal when it comes to the economic disruption. I mean, small businesses basically are the engine, and we've just been shut down for the most part. Not everyone, but a lot of them, and everyone else is scrambling to pivot, and so we're all in this together. So it's sort of like that, isn't it? Like the mission
yeah,
is real now. Like, so let's come together and figure this shit out.
yeah. I was having a conversation with my oldest son. He's 9, and he was talking to me about, we were watching the press conference around like the declaration of war, right,
Mm.
against COVID-19, and he's like, "Is this like war?" And I said, it is and it isn't. I said, in war, you got planes, you've got soldiers, ships. I mean, you kind of
You can see the enemy
you
usually.
can see the enemy, right? This thing is invisible, and I said, even though it's disproportionately affecting, African Americans and the poor, which isn't surprising because they're the most vulnerable when you come to this kind of situations. I
Mhm.
said, when the Prime Minister of Great Britain gets COVID-19, I just let you know, this thing doesn't care. It
It
it,
doesn't.
it it is not checking, W-2s and
Right.
W-9s and keeping a list. I mean, so it's. I think it's almost a universe's way of forcing us, even though we're in this. And I tell people, I say, listen, I hope that we can really adhere to physical distancing and not social distancing, because I
Mhm.
think in many ways this is forcing us to almost build closer social connections because we're
Agree.
all legitimately in this thing together.
I agree. It's a huge opportunity. Don't you see it
Yeah.
that way? Or do you see it that way?
Yeah.
Huge opportunity for us to grow individually and also to grow through by becoming more connected and more compassionate to our fellow humans all across the globe, and my sincerest desire is that we don't slide backwards when this, it recedes into the distance, right? We usually, we use it as an opportunity to leap forward in our consciousness and our connectedness.
I'm with you. I think I wholeheartedly agree. Like, if we as individuals or as a society go back to business as usual once this thing dissipates, then shame on us. I mean,
I
this
say
is,
fail. I agree.
yeah, you're right. I mean, this is about I mean, I always tell people, no one had this on their fridge in December of 2019. Like, no one thought 2020 would look this way.
It wasn't
We've
on
got to
anyone's
learn from it.
vision board. Let's put it that way.
No one's vision board had a pandemic on it. If so, then tell them to go somewhere else, right? I mean, no one had this up on the vision board for sure.
Hey, folks, I want to tell you about a coffee alternative that I really enjoy that has medicinal mushrooms and adaptogens. It's got caffeine, but 1/7 as a cup of coffee, and you get the sustainable energy without the anxiety or jitters or the crash of coffee. It's got turmeric for inflation, cinnamon to suppress sugar craving, cacao and chai for mood and energy, lion's mane for focus, cordyceps for your physical performance, and chaga and reishi for immune and stress response. It's loaded. It gives me energy and focus without those jitters you get from drinking coffee. They donate a portion of each month's revenue to the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, which is important to me because we support vets with post traumatic stress, and those things help with depression. The team at Mudwater is giving you a special code, Unbeatable Mind, where you can receive 20% off your order at their website. Their website is mudwtr.com. That's mudwtr.com. Get 20% off using the code UNBEATABLEMIND. Hoo-yah. Let's get back to your story a little bit. So I can see how this would be a very inspiring moment, but how do you go from coaching sixth graders to thinking that's going to translate to an NFL career when, you were heading off to be a lawyer?
Yeah, I was a bit delusional, right? I knew there was this experience that really moved me, and I don't know why I thought I was going to get a shot, but my my thought process at the time was, look, I'm going to graduate from law school, number one, but I'm going to write a letter to every team in the NFL, to most colleges, and just ask if I can volunteer. And let's just see, with the exception of some time, the cost of envelopes, paper and a stamp, I'm not going to lose much. I'm just going to see what comes up. And 31 of the 32 teams rejected me. So it's like, Mark, I throw an envelope in the mailbox, and it's like I go back the next day and the rejection was there. Chargers no, Patriots no, Dolphins no, and then finally got my yes from Herm Edwards of the Chiefs.
And did you ask him why he said yes once you got to know him?
So he told me, he said, listen, I don't really read my mail, and his assistant just happened to put my letter on his desk, and it was at the top of the pile for some reason. And I think it had a sticky, like something like, you got to read this. And
That's awesome.
He said, I'm reading this and I'm thinking to myself, this guy is either insane or extremely driven. And, both qualities will help you in the NFL. So let me give him a call. And I'm still, one of my mentors, extremely indebted to him because, 32 teams, those positions are rare. Each team brings in 2 interns per year. And one of my first jobs after I got on full time was opening mail. We would get 40 letters on average a day from people across the world wanting to get in. So just really fortunate he gave me a break.
Wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And you had, so this was an internship where you learned how to coach because, so far your coaching experience is limited to this 2-week camp, right?
Yeah. So he basically said, listen, here's what's going to happen. You're a training camp intern. And he's like, look, here are the terms: no pay, no benefits, 18-hour days. I'm like, all right, sign me up. I'm in. Awesome. And he said, listen, here's the thing. Here's your job description. So he hands a blank sheet of paper to me. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? I said, okay. He goes,
read between the lines.
He goes, listen, whenever anyone needs anything, you're the guy. I don't care what time of the day it is, what time of the night, where you are. If someone needs something on this team, you're the guy. And with that, that's how I got started. So, picking up lunch, picking up breakfast, wiping down whiteboards. Every morning I would walk around to the 13 assistant coaches' offices and kind of knock and say, hey, just want to know if you need anything. And for the first couple of weeks, they'd cuss me out and slam the door and tell me to get the hell out of there. And slowly but surely, I started getting assignments. I'd hold the dummies for the offensive linemen during practice. So I was a literal punching bag for part of that time. But it was great. I can't even, I think what Herm understood was the only way that I was going to learn the game was just to absorb as much information, to be quiet, sit in the back of the room, take notes. He's like, listen, at no point during this experience will I see you without a notebook and a pen. And so, man, I still got those notes. I've got reams of paper where I just sat in the back of the room, listening to coaches talk about technique, strategy, philosophy, and just soaked it up.
And so what did that look like after this one, this first internship?
So
back or what, did you go somewhere else?
Yeah. So we get to the end of the season. We went 4-12, which, as you know, is not a good record. Black Monday rolls around the NFL, which is when everybody gets fired, and the head coach fires 4 assistant coaches.
Hmm.
So my office was this converted closet. We had torn the door off the hinges, and secretary comes by and she says, "Hey, Coach Edwards would like to see you." I'm like, "Shit."
Yeah. Uh-oh.
I mean, I'm watching these assistant coaches walk into his office. Mark, they come out with 2 things. They've got a security guard and a dolly, and they've got 45 minutes to clear their belongings out of their office and leave Arrowhead. So after watching this procession go down, I'm like, damn it, man. I'm like, can you even, in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, can you even get fired from an internship? Like, is that a thing? I mean, I had
Yeah.
not signed a piece of paperwork in 6 months. So I walk in, he sits down and says, listen, man, appreciate all of your contributions. I'm like, damn it. He's starting with a compliment. It's over.
Yeah.
He says, listen, here's your first NFL coaching contract. There were 16 pages to it. Mark, I flipped to the back page. I saw a line for my name. I signed it, put a date on it. He's like, ho. He goes, didn't you take contract law? I was like, yeah. I said, Coach, listen, I understand when I have leverage, and in this situation, I have zero, none. So I'm not going to argue any terms in this contract. I just want to get to work. So I worked there. I coached there for 2 years. My defensive coordinator took me to Detroit, coached with the Lions for 2. I went to West Virginia for 2, coached on offense and defense those 2 years. And then my last stint was with the Cleveland Browns in 2013.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So what were some of the biggest ahas or insights you had during that, really formative period of your actually being a coach, on an NFL team?
Yeah.
Across these three franchises that you've carried forward, and now you're teaching people, or kind of have been foundational to your work now.
Yeah. I think the first thing that I noticed was the insane work ethic of the elite.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Gonzalez with the Chiefs, Calvin Johnson, the Detroit Lions. So here are 2 guys who, out of the womb, they've got the genetic code to be tall and big. And if there were any 2 players in the league at their positions who could have just sort of shown up on a Sunday and still been really damn good, like those guys could have done it.
Mm-hmm.
But Tony Gonzalez did 500 push-ups and sit-ups in the hallway between meetings every day. He caught 200 balls on the jugs machine before practice. For every ball that he dropped at practice, he did 50 catches on the jugs machine after practice. Calvin Johnson, aka Megatron, this guy would get the script for all the plays we would run in practice that day, come in the morning and walk through the routes for each and every single play by himself. Like, one of his rules was no one could be on the practice field when he was doing this. He would just walk through and visually go through those routes. So I noticed that oftentimes what we see in terms of performance, we see the end product, right? We see someone reaching the IPO stage or winning some award,
Mm-hmm.
but the truly elite performers have this fidelity to the process that is from a psychological standpoint, it is damn near insane, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's also with coaches. So I think that was one takeaway. I think the second piece is that you learn so much more when you shut the hell up. To put it blank, I was coming from probably the most challenging educational school on the planet. I mean, the first year of Harvard Law School is like a damn, hazing meets, all the evils in the world, and they're just trying to see who wants to stick around. Like, who's crazy enough to come back for a second run? And but I realized that in the football world, that experience didn't carry any damn weight. Like, there was no cachet. the players, neither the players nor the coaches cared about that experience. All they wanted to know was every single day, like, how can Daron help us to get better?
Mm-hmm.
And the only way I got better was by being quiet, absorbing information, being strategic with my questions when I had an opportunity to ask them. I
Mm-hmm.
think that oftentimes, we're kind of in a society where everyone's trying to one up someone else and get the last word in. That really showed me sort of the value of buying your time, listening,
Right.
taking notes, reading back through your notes, like really going as deep as possible into your craft.
I love that. If I could just kind of pause there, because I had a similar experience. I was a CPA, certified public accountant, and an MBA from NYU. Not
Hmm.
quite as prestigious as Harvard, but it's definitely usually in the
Oh,
top
come on, man.
15 to 20. And then I joined the SEALs
Wow.
when I was 26. I turned 26 in SEAL training. And when I finished training, I went to SEAL Team 3, and I got into a platoon where I was the third officer. Normally there's two officers, but we just happened to have a few extra officers. And when I got there, they said, okay, you're going into Alpha Platoon. You're just going to be an FNG, just like all the enlisted guys, even though that was 26-year-old MBA CPA ensign, newly minted ensign in the Navy. I was an FNG, and that's a fucking new guy. It was the best experience of my life because I just got to be a shooter. I just got to sit and listen. And just like you as an intern or a new coach, I just kept my mouth shut, eyes wide open, journal by my side, and just kept learning. And it's a great lesson. That's where I learned the whole idea of, show up every day, empty your cup, because, you don't know nothing. I knew a lot about being, a little about being a CPA, but nothing about being a SEAL. And matter, right? Rank doesn't matter. Degrees don't matter. In fact, there was another guy, you'd appreciate this too, someone who kind of followed your path, but into the SEALs. He was a Harvard Law graduate who basically ditched law and came into the SEALs as an enlisted warrior. And he was honor man of his class.
What?
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
Wow. Wow.
Similar kind of transformation. He was probably in his last year and he's like, screw that. It's post 9/11. I'm going to go fight for my country, and became an elite warrior as a Harvard Law grad.
Damn.
Anyway, so that's the point. Shut up and listen. I love that. That's so powerful. Empty the cup. And at what point does that, is that like a universal principle, or is there a point where you finally get to be an expert and share your wisdom and knowledge?
Yeah, it took me 2 years. So I did that for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then my defensive coordinator, a guy named Gunther Cunningham, he went from the Chiefs to the Lions and calls me up in the middle of the night. He's like, hey, listen, you're on the 8 a.m. flight to Detroit tomorrow. You're going to be my assistant defensive backs coach. So you're going to coach, help coach the corners and the safeties. He's like, everything you've learned from watching us and being with me for the last 2 years, now it's time for you to teach. And that's when it flipped for me. And I can tell you that I probably would not have been in a position to do well that first true coaching opportunity with the Lions had I not embraced, the mindset of empty the cup every single day when I was with the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the failures that you had in this process, and how did you overcome them? And what was your, kind of your mantra or your process for dealing with the challenges and the failures that are inevitable?
Yeah, I can think of some of my first assignments. And I remember our season opener in 2008 with the Chiefs was against the Patriots. We were going to go to Foxborough. And my job was to create the scouting report for the Patriots offense. So I had to watch 4 of their games from the previous season and kind of chart tendencies and diagram each play. And so I diagram, it must have been around about 240 plays. And it's a Monday, game week, the Monday before that upcoming Sunday. And the defensive coordinator, we're sitting in a room with a full defensive staff. So linebackers, secondary coach, like all the coaches on defense. And he went play by play, the coordinator did, and basically pointed out every inconsistency, mistake, oversight that I made in this scouting report. And I mean, this meeting lasted for 4 hours. And it was, he would sprinkle some expletives here and there. And, that taught me a lot about humility. You've got to, I think that, I coach, so I coach executives now. I teach at the University of Texas, have a Center for Sports Leadership and Innovation. And I work with a lot of athletes who are either retired NFL players transitioning or they're about to retire. Mm-hmm. And especially during this time, they always ask me, like, how do I, like, what's the mindset I need to have right now? And I said, two traits come to mind, and they are humility and agility, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to be humble enough to say, I don't know what the fuck's going on. This is something that none of us have seen. Mm-hmm. And then 2, to say, if there was ever a time in the history of mankind where I could try something and no one would give a damn, it would be now.
Correct. That's awesome. If you've been a longtime listener of my podcast, you might have heard me talk about electric muscle stimulation and the PowerDot and know that I'm a big fan of it. If you're not familiar, EMS uses electrical signals sent into your muscle to force contractions. Those contractions increase blood circulation. They'll flush waste from the muscles, increase the muscle's potential and hypertrophy. As a natural adjunct to your training, the PowerDot can help you relieve pain, recover faster, and improve your performance. I've been using this tool for a while now. I love it. It does help me relieve pain from training. I recover a lot faster from my workouts. And most importantly for me, it accelerates me past training plateaus. And I can use this thing basically at home or at my gym, or even take it with me when I travel. It's a very small package, and I can run it from my phone. The other thing I appreciate about is the education I get from within the app. I'm able to select the body part I want to focus on, the program that best suits my needs, and then the app prompts me with the pad placement and gives me additional tips on how to use it and ideas on best practices. I don't need a user manual. I don't need to search the internet to figure out how to use this thing. It's not surprising to me that PowerDot is being used by professional athletes around the globe, from the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL, MLS, and elite athletes from the Tour de France, Olympians and CrossFitters, and special operators. So now you can improve your physical training immediately with this smart muscle stimulator device, the PowerDot. They're now offering a 30-day at-home trial, and they're giving Unbeatable Mind listeners an additional 20% off for a limited time. So don't sit around waiting for this one. Go get it at PowerDot.com. That's PowerDot.com. Use the code UNBEATABLE when you check out. So it's PowerDot.com. Use the code UNBEATABLE when you check out. All right, go check it out. I think this is a great tool. Hoo-yah. So how do I know from a sports standpoint, like agility is a learned skill. How do you think one can learn agility right now when they need to get it fast, right? Because, the old way isn't going to work anymore.
Yeah. So I think it's a 3-part process right now. I think quickly, whether you are a solopreneur, Fortune 500 company, whatever it may be, you've got to assess the situation. So again, take inventory of your assets. And I'm not talking about hard assets. I'm talking about human capital. Okay. So what can the people on your team do better than people in other positions? How are you positioned in the marketplace? Then I think you have to adapt. And so in this way, I think of some of the companies that I've seen who've made extraordinary pivots. Just in Austin, there's a produce wholesaler. So they sell produce to restaurants. Mm-hmm. And they quickly found out that, damn, when restaurants close, the wholesaling business goes down, right? Right. Instead of kind of, putting up a sign and going to try to get a loan and closing up shop, they have now pivoted to B2C, where they are delivering boxes of produce to consumers. So my wife, she gets a shipment every week because we can't get it at the grocery store because of shortages. And I was talking with one of the guys, with the delivery guy, and he said, you know what, like we're getting close to our revenue targets with this new model.
Wow. That's a quick pivot. Holy cow.
Quick pivot. And I said, well, how'd you do it? He goes, you know what? We freaking put up an Instagram picture that said, hey, DM us if you want produce. I said, well, he goes, look, there were no systems in place. We were not, we weren't running our business on Shopify, right? But we said to ourselves, let's see if there's demand. And if there is, we'll figure the rest of it out later. Right. And that's what I love. I mean, I think there is a place at this point right now to have some strategic recklessness.
Yeah.
In the sense of
ready, fire, aim will actually work.
right. Because you need to see what the market thinks. And if you get a bite, go for it. You'll figure it out. So I would say assess, adapt. And then the last thing, I think you and I are on the same page, is advance. Just make some forward progress. Don't overthink it. And if it doesn't work, make another pivot and hit the repeat button.
Yeah, right. Fear can be a huge distractor for people. How do you stay focused and ward off, negativity, when shit goes down like this?
Yeah. So a few things. One, I even before this chaos, I practice gratitude in the morning and at night. So, my usual routine is I'm getting up at 4:45. I take a cold shower. I speak 3 points of gratitude to myself in the mirror. I go into my closet. I say I meditate. I tried to meditate, read a lot of books, was burning incense and all that shit. I said, you know what? I'm just going to go in my closet and try to get still for 10 minutes. That's it.
Good. Yeah.
I'm going to try to breathe through the nose, out through the mouth, quiet my brain. I do that for 10 minutes and then I get a run in. And so I think gratitude is the first thing. I think the second point that is critical, especially now, is you've got to control your content, right? So I will check the news. Yeah,
control. You allow in, right? I see.
Yeah. So you've got to control your intake, and I call it, there's a real thing called Instagram envy. So researchers are finding they're taking people, they're measuring their happiness levels before putting them through this experiment. Then they'll show the people their own Instagram timeline. So they'll show them the post from their own friends, and then they'll come back in and they'll ask them the same questions about happiness. And, the overwhelming majority, I think it's something like 82%, they're coming out of that experiment more depressed, more anxious, because, you start looking at everyone else's sort of glossy, cropped pictures and you think, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Right.
When I look in the mirror, that's not what I see, right?
That's not what I see. It's not how my life is going. Right now we're talking, I'm sitting in my wife's closet. I took over half of the space. She's going to start charging me rent here pretty soon. This is my new studio, because I can't go to my office at the University of Texas. So it's like, hey, I'm going to set up in your place. So I try to control, I only look at the news once a day. I am very quick to unfollow or mute people on social media. I only have parts of the day when I'm on social media. So I think just control, like the intake, like being very strategic about strategic and intentional about saying, this is what I choose to consume on a daily basis. It can't be left up to, let me just go and scroll. I think that's critically important in a time like this, or even outside of this period, in order to really maintain your mindset.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's a big part of my practice. I took the TV out of my house like almost 20 years ago. So that's check, right? That's a big one right there.
Yeah. How was that? How was that transition?
It was fine for me because we watch certain things, but I've been a meditator since 20, and I found that the speed of the commercials and the repetition, it literally hurt my head. And so I was like, I just can't watch TV. And even nowadays, I can't watch it. Like if I go into a restaurant or something is playing, it's interesting to me because there is some value to TV where you can kind of keep a pulse on culture if you use it properly.
Mm.
So sometimes I can be unplugged in that regard. But the benefits are far outweigh, whatever downside. So just taking it out. And it taught me to do two things with the rest of the way I get my news. So usually I get my news just by scanning headlines, and I play opposite day with the headlines, right? So I read the headline and I think, what's the exact opposite? And then I think that's probably closer to the truth. and then I have trusted sources who are like people that I know other people trust. So, I don't want to be my own bias, filter, who do, an analysis on what's going on. And so I have one who's like a geopolitician, George Friedman. I read his stuff, and I have an economics guy named Maudlin I really like.
Yeah.
So I get their stuff every day, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of really interesting perspective. And then I'll even kind of like downgrade that by 10 or 20% because of their bias filters. So anyways, it's just a different way to consume, and it's not getting drawn into the negativity and the constant distraction. I think that's part of it. Part of it is negativity. That's probably the worst part. The second part is you're constantly being distracted away from your own truth, your own reality, and what's really important, with these different media sources.
Yeah, and I love that. And I also, I'm constantly reminded that, the flip of that too with the news cycle is also, other people, there are so many people who have designs for your time. Like, they have request and ask. And I would say the third thing for me is once I embrace the power of saying no, I was one of those guys like, oh, I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want them to think less of me. And I remember 2 years ago, I was sitting in a parking lot about to head into one of these galas that I hate going to.
I can't stand those.
So, and I literally almost had a breakdown. I just pulled out of the parking lot and went home. And it was just like the thought of the scent of the chicken and the cheesecake and fake conversations. I was like, fuck it, I'm going home. And I remember I sat down and I wrote, okay, look, I'm only going to do at a maximum one dinner per month. I limited the number of like podcast interviews or in-person meetings or calls. And Mark, man, my life changed. It was easy for me because now I said, hey, I had this reason to say, hey, here's my system. I appreciate the opportunity, but here's what I've committed to. Let me know if I could be of value in the future. And I walked away, with that new mindset. My life has changed like 10x. It's been for the better.
Totally appreciate that. And it's very hard because I basically stated I was going to do that, and it's part of what I teach, and I still say yes to shit that I don't want to say yes to. And then, I tell you what, this is another way to look at it. Like this has hit me in the face recently because everything's been canceled for me right now. And I'm totally relieved. I'm like, yes, right? Like I don't have to go back and do that thing at my reunion, and I don't have to do that, and I don't have to do that. And I'm like, I didn't want to do that stuff anyways, but I couldn't say no. Right? So what are your criteria? Like, what's your secret to your success?
So this is so funny because my mom calls me and, I do like 60 keynotes a year and, trainings. And she's like, oh my gosh, Dan, I just know that you're having a hard time dealing with this. And,
and you're like, nope.
I'm like, I walk into my closet. I'm like, actually, Mom, this is kind of great. She's like, what? I said, it's been a learning lesson for me because I knew at the point to where I would look at the next week and say to myself, yes, I don't have to do this thing, whatever it was.
I know. What if we could put ourselves, here's what I'm going to do from now on. And I'm stating this publicly. Before I say yes, I'm going to put myself into a future state and just say, am I excited that I'm getting on the plane to go do this thing? Right?
Yes. Mark, that's what I do.
Say no. Oh, you do? Good. So tell us about that.
No, so that I am 100% honest about this. So this is what I do. And a mentor of mine told me this. He said, okay, listen, whether in person or via email or phone call, never say yes on the spot. And I
Mhm.
said, okay, he goes, just give yourself a chance, like create some space between stimulus and response.
Right.
You need that space. He said, the next thing I want you to do is I want you to visualize, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is like the corny, close your eyes and see into the future. He goes, no, listen, visualize yourself getting off the plane, walking into the ballroom, checking into the hotel, like walk through the experience, whatever it is, and then I then want you to take an inventory of your feeling. And Mark, I let me tell you something, man.
Mhm.
Game changer.
I bet. I
Like
love that.
because it's I feel like you like I think oftentimes because we make quick responses like, yeah, I'll do that. Like the brain gets tricked into, yeah, I could probably do that. It'd be okay. But when you really slow the clock down,
Mhm.
you're like, oh shit, no, I don't want to connect in Minneapolis.
Right.
No, I don't want to go to another right chicken dinner. And I'm telling you, man, it has changed my life. That one
Yeah.
practice.
I love that. And it's so easy to say yes to something that's down the road, months and months, and you're like, yeah, whatever, that's in the future.
Yeah.
And then as you get closer and closer, you're like, "Ah,
Uh,
grr. Why am I doing this again? Help remind me, right? All right. So if you're listening, that's your new SOP. Never
yes.
say yes on the spot. Say, let me think about it, or let me check with my boss, who's going to be your wife or
Yeah.
husband, and then visualize it. Walk dirt dive it. I love that. We're going to dirt dive it and feel into it. And if it's and the other, that's when you apply the saying that if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no,
Yeah.
right? Because if you don't feel like super excited, like it's an honor for me to be there, then no.
Yeah. I tell you what, I mean, there are a few articles that have really changed my, mindset, and that Derek Sievers, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell
Yeah.
no. I've read that it's probably one of the most shared articles for me that I kind of, whether it's students or execs, whatever it may be. And it's spot on because,
Mhm.
and I've even done sort of a personal study. I'll go 3 months back and I'll say, hey, the things you committed to, did you want to do them? And then how did it turn out? And oftentimes
Mhm.
we think that we're going to miss the big thing.
Mhm.
That's very rarely the case, right? Like
Mhm.
I am happy with where I am because I have the time to funnel into the craft that I want to become better at. If I keep saying yes, I got 5 kids. Mark, I'm out of time, man. I mean, right?
Mhm. Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, this has been awesome. I want to be sensitive to our time here, so we're going to wrap up. But your book is called an Audible, and that's available. Is it available on Audible? Speaking of that, since so many people are listening to Audible nowadays, or audio.
Yes. Yep. So the audiobooks on Audible, ebook, and also hardcover
Okay.
on Amazon.
And do you have so you got the Center of Sports Leadership and Innovation, and do you have like a personal website? What's your podcast? So let us know how to connect with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So, I think the best way to connect with me, I love LinkedIn. It is of all the social media platforms, 80% of my time is there, and then
Mm.
the 20% is kind of on the other ones. So,
Mhm.
check me out on LinkedIn, just Daron K. Roberts. I'm at Coach DKR on all other social media platforms.
Mhm.
My personal website is just coachdkr.com. And so, and also, so I had a podcast, A Tribe Called Yes. Actually, tomorrow I'm launching a pop-up podcast, Mark. So this is
Mm.
only a podcast that I'm going to run throughout this COVID-19
Oh, cool.
craziness,
Right.
and it's called the Pivot Playbook. So, I'm bringing in business owners who've made pivots. Like one of my first guests is a guy who had a in-person trivia game that was shut down, and then he's gone virtual now, and has doubled his revenue. So we're going to bring in business owners who've had to pivot during COVID and try to glean some lessons that, the rest of us can use moving forward.
Terrific. And people can find out about that at your website?
Yes, it'll be on the website.
Awesome. Well, Daron, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate your humility and your insight. It's just been a really pleasant conversation. Super
Likewise, Mark. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Hoo-yah. And good luck with your pivoting.
Yes, sir. Stay in the deep end.
Thank you. All right, folks. Daron K. Roberts. Check him out at daronkroberts.com. Check out his podcast and LinkedIn at Daron K. Roberts. Yeah, let's go support Daron. A great guy. And for everyone out there who is struggling, well, this is time to breathe and to think about how you can pivot, how you can come out of this stronger. And for those of you who are thriving, let's turn our attention to helping others so that we all get through this stronger. And let's not backtrack when it's over. Let's commit to opening up our hearts and being more connected and more inclusive and making the world a better place. That's what we're going to try to do here at Unbeatable Mind. I appreciate your support. And let's do this thing. Hoo-yah. Divine out.
Lock and load, boys. Time to explode, boys. Make sure you get home, boys. They got your back. The pride of the fleets. The bright swinging frogmen